Hear me now. We're going to be back in Mark chapter 9. Stephen, does that mean you're up there hiding behind those monitors? No, he left? Oh, he did leave. You let him know I thought I got him. Brother Hank, walking, living, breathing testimony to faithfulness. Will you open us in a word of prayer this morning? We are going to be back in Mark chapter 9, but before we get started, I have been given a PSA, which normally go to Brother Fraser back there, or the other mic. They go to the mics. So I intentionally plan on doing this poorly so I don't continue to get these. It's like the whole break a glass, you don't have to do the dishes thing. But on October 6th, we're going to start as a church the LBC Cafe, which is going to be between 9 and 9:30 in the fellowship hall every Sunday morning. If you're asking me what that is, that's the extent of my PSA. Ask Mike, or the pastor, or Doc. Also, on Wednesday, the 18th of this month, Brother Fraser is going to start his coffee cup class. No, I think it has a better name than that, but that's what I remember. That's what I wrote down. And so please keep both of those in mind. Mark chapter 9. Last week we didn't finish. Shocked. But in my mind, we got the theme across. That theme being this picture that greatness is encouraged by God, but what greatness is flipped upside down. The world's definition, our definition of greatness, and his, they're different things. And so, Brother Kevin, with that being done, I just intended to go on to chapter 10. Look, the point got across, and I don't want to stay in one passage too long in this book, and we've been in this passage, from the end of chapter 8 to chapter 9 for like a month and a half. And so we're just going to go on to chapter 10. Now, I do want you to see where chapter 10 begins. Chapter 10, verse 4, and they said, Moses suffered to write a bill of divorcement and to put her away. All right, so chapter 10 begins with this. Let's talk about divorce. So I have the end of chapter 9. I have the beginning of chapter 10. The end of chapter 9 actually starts talking about hell. So, Brother Mark, here's my choice. I can go back and I can finish up some things on chapter 9 where we get to talk about hell. Or I can jump into chapter 10 where we get to talk about divorce. And I was like, well, neither one of those topics are helpful. Neither one of those register on the fun meter. And so, Kevin, I said, get back on this pace, get back on this view of going through here at Marksby. We're just going to go straight into chapter 10. And I was starting to try to make myself encouraged about it, and I was doing all of this research. And then somewhere, I think it was about Tuesday, then around Tuesday, I heard this sermon, and in the sermon was given this illustration. A member of the royal family went to, I guess it's the Church of England, First Church of England, I'm sure, went to church. And on the way out, actually, I don't know this either, Doc, the bishop, the cardinal, the whatever, talking to the speaker on the way out the door. And it's a member of the royal family, an opportunity, they're supposed to say something. So, Brother Fraser, they stopped and speaking with the pastor, for lack of the perfect term. You can tell I didn't look up the illustration. And said, I do have a question for you. Can I ask you a question? It's supposed to be, let me tell you about the sermon, but I have a question. And so, of course, the pastor said, sure, ask anything. Is hell real? And so there was a pause. There was a, choke up in the throat. And the response was something about, Jesus spoke about it. The Bible records it. The church believes in it. And you can tell this is the Church of England. And the creeds teach it. So the member of the royal family turns back and says, can I ask you a follow-up question? Sure. Then why don't you speak on it? And dog, that just was like a punch in the gut. Well, you can't skip 9 and just jump into 10. And so, I know it's just rough when that happens. So we're going to pick things up where we left off in chapter 9. Now remember, after the healing of the boy, after the casting out of the demon of the boy, they basically went on a walkabout. And they go on a trip. By the time we get to verse 33, he came to Capernaum, probably to Peter's house, the capital of his ministry in this area. And he asked the disciples, hey, what were you talking about on our little walk? Not because he needed to know the answer, he already knew the answer, but because he needed them to think about it. And what were they talking about? They were talking about who was going to be the greatest. And we learn a great thing here in that greatness is not wrong. Nowhere in here does he say the desire to be great is the issue. In fact, how he answers them is, let me tell you what it looks like to be great. And so this is where we started last week, verse 35 of chapter 9. Whosoever shall receive, oh no, that's where he gives the illustration. Let's back up to 35. And he sat down and called the 12 and said unto them, if any man desire to be first, if you want to be great, the same shall be last of all and servant of all. Here's what greatness looks like. Greatness, then we should desire to be great. Inside of us, as created beings of God, inside of us should be a desire to be successful. He has a purpose for us, and we should desire to be successful in that purpose. But he goes on to tell them the picture of what greatness is. It's not lording over. It's not desiring to be the boss. It's not this power. It's the opposite. It's serving. And the same thing is said in Luke chapter 18, and he says the same thing in Matthew chapter 20. I think it's verse 25. He said, this is the way the Gentiles think. This is not the way you're supposed to think. And then he goes on and he gives them the illustration. He takes a child up to him and he says, here, picture this child. And this is supposed to be an encouragement, a picture for us. And when you take a look at the child, especially in that society, a child really didn't have a whole lot of value. In fact, what a child is, it needs, it takes, it demands, and it doesn't give anything back until it gets to be older. Then it's no longer a child, it's an adult. And so, Brother Mike, the picture is for us that we need to serve, we need to give, we need to love to those who don't give it back. We're supposed to love because God loves. And so it's at this picture, and this is really probably about as far as we got. Then in verse 38, so here we have this picture. This is a tough picture. And hi, wife. When I go through here, you know me, I just got to stick myself in here. So I picture the awkwardness of this reprimand. First, Brother Mark, they didn't exactly say, hey, this is what we're talking about, because they were embarrassed. But Jesus obviously knew what they were talking about. And then they get this reprimand that their whole train of thought is the wrong train of thought. And so in the middle of this, to me, John speaks up. Now, this is not shocking, because this is what I would do. Let's change the subject. In fact, while you're telling me that I didn't do right, let me bring up a subject where I did. And so they bring up the man. Well, we saw a man casting out demons and doing things in your name, but he's not of us. So we told him to stop. Didn't we do a good thing? You see the change of subject? Okay, so we were bad here, but when we did this, wasn't this okay? Bait and switch. Should have been a salesperson. And Jesus' response is, nope. And we spent a little time here, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time. I'll just say this. The best of men are men at best, which is a quote from somebody. I don't know who. I've heard it my whole life. So it's probably a quote from someone 300 years ago. And 300 people claim it. But it's something we need to learn to live in. The best of men, the best of us are still just men. And we struggle with wanting things to be our way, wanting people to be from our group, to go to our school, to be the people we're comfortable with. But Mark, God is at work. And he's working through prayer, and he's working through his word, and he's working through the Spirit. So the only thing I would say is if we think there's an issue, then we ought to learn to ask this question: how readest thou? Because if we can get anyone back to the Word of God, His Word, His Spirit, and our prayer will take care of things. But too often we're trying to do it ourselves, and that didn't work out so well for them there. Now, that brings us back to verse 41, which is where I think we get back on topic. So, Jesus is talking to him, and what he's talking to him about, Miss Sarah, what he's talking to him about is, this is what greatness looks like. And we got one thing. What greatness looks like is serving and loving, not lording over. Well, that didn't exactly, set them on fire. They weren't hoping, well, it did set them on fire, but they weren't on fire with joy. No David dancing right here. They tried to change the subject. He teaches a little lesson, and he gets right back on topic, which seems like an easy thing to do, but it's not always easy. And he picks up that topic in verse 41. For whosoever shall give you a cup of water to drink in my name, because you belong to Christ, verily I say unto you, he shall not lose his reward. Now, in my Bible, it has a little break right there, like this is changing subject, but I believe that little break should be between 42 and 43, so that's how we're going to look at it. 41, for whosoever shall give you a cup of water to drink in my name, because ye belong to Christ, verily I say unto you, he shall not lose his reward. Verse 42, and whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and were cast into the sea. So I think something's obvious here. One, he brought and he put his arms around a child and he began to talk, using him as the illustration. John interrupts. In verse 41 and 42, he gets back on topic. I think he still has his arms around that little child. Because what he said, whoever, cup of water, whoever offend, what? One of these. So I think when we take a look at the next two things, they're all still on topic. Brother Mark, he's still giving us this picture of what greatness is. Now, if you look at somebody who really studies the book of Mark, usually this passage right here is going to be broken down into 4, sometimes 5. Starting from where we started last week to the end of this book, it's usually 4 or 5 studies. And I think that's valuable because there are a lot of information. But if you break this down to 4 or 5, what you're missing is all of this is a picture of greatness. Okay, greatness is serving and loving. Greatness also is this picture. We have to be serious about these things. Okay, the Christian walk is, it's not frivolous. It's not this idea, and sometimes this is lifted up. It's not this idea of whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and it's okay. And Brother Mike, see, this is a test of my great faith. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It's okay. In fact, and let me say this, I very much like this phrase. Okay, I like this phrase, but I think this phrase is misapplied often. More often than it's applied correctly, it's misapplied. And that's this: let go and let God. That's a great phrase. You know what it's meant to talk about? Our dependence on God. We cannot make things happen. It depends on God. Too often what it ends up being is, I have nothing to do. It's my excuse to be nothing. God's going to make whatever happen, and I'm just sitting here coasting through life. That is not the picture. In fact, he's going against that. There is something to be done. Life is a serious thing. Christian life makes changes in our life. It should change our viewpoint. It should change our desires. Those things change our action. They change our responses. They change every effect of our life. In fact, he backs this down and he gives us two little points. One, understand this, that there is a reward for normal things. Kevin, it's not just great things. It's normal things. What normal thing? Giving a cup of cold water. That's a normal thing. Okay, we need to do the normal things. You know, if you give a cup of cold water, guess what? There's going to be a reward for it. The response should be, so let's do it. Remember, Mark, this is not the picture of I'm just going to let go and I'm just going to go through life and I'm going to take care of me and God's going to work it all out. But that's almost become the modern day Christian motto. Our responsibility is none. We've given it all to God, and that sounds like a good thing. Well, let me tell you, God's the only one that can make anything happen, but he chooses to make it happen through us. So we need to start getting busy doing the little things we know need to do, because he's going to, first of all, reward us for them. And secondly, maybe even more important, there's a warning that if you don't, there's consequences for this. But Mike, if you do this, you're not going to lose your reward. Verse 41, 42, if you don't. And whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged around his neck and he were cast into the sea. Rob, this is a gruesome death. My dad was in the Navy, got out of the Navy, went into the Army, retired out of the Army. I used to tease him all the time, tell him that was the best thing he ever did. I would not want to go in the Navy. Don't shoot my ship and have me drown. Shoot me, let me die quick. The picture of drowning to me is terrifying. Okay, this was said to the Israelites. They weren't seagoing people. They were fishermen, and if you read, anytime the sea got big, they were nervous. The Israelites were scared to death of the sea. And he intentionally goes, you'll be drowning in the sea. It's a big picture. This is a common theme gone throughout the scriptures, by the way. Genesis chapter 12, what does he tell Abraham? I'm going to make you a great nation. You know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to bless them that bless you. And I'm going to curse them that curse you. Go through the Psalms. Psalm 105. It says, be careful, my prophets. You know what? There's a blessing for those that take care of my prophets. If you don't, there's a curse for those for abusing my prophets. Again and again and again, here is this picture. And that's what he's talking about here. Understand this, that if we offend one of these little ones, in the sister passage in Matthew chapter 18, I think it's verse 7, it says this, it says, woe to the world because of the offenses. Brother Mark, I like that. I like that passage better. Because here it is, it's talking about, woe to the world. Don't let the world be a stumbling block, be an offense to these little ones. Because I expect the world to be a stumbling block. I like the idea almost of judgment on the world. But he's not talking to the world. He's talking to the 12. And when we start to think about us becoming a stumbling block, we start talking about us causing others to sin. Us entrapping. That's a tough word. Brother Mike, that's a tough word. We start using that word. You know, you break this word down. Entrapping is the good word. Us entrapping others in sin. Well, how can we solicit others or encourage others to the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, the pride of life? Well, that's the do, be, and have. There. 4 ways. I need to hurry because we're not going to get to the part that I don't want to skip over. But there are 4 ways. 1, there's a direct temptation. We don't have time to look at this, but I'll tell you one of the great pictures of a direct temptation is Amnon had a friend. King David's son had a friend, and he went to his friend, and he complained and said, oh, I want to do this terribly evil thing. What was the terrible? I have a thing for my sister. And his friend began to help him devise a plan to get what he wants. There's a direct temptation. No Christian would do that. I wish you were right. But I'll switch it a little bit and say, okay, how about this? How about I come to you and start complaining about my wife? Or I complain about my kids? Or I complain about work? Or I complain about church? I complain about Brother Mike. Now, you would understand that one. I'm not looking up because Miss Paul is probably already ready to defend him now. We don't talk about him that way. Okay, that puts you in a position for a response. Too often our response is, yeah, brother, I understand. great, tear down my defenses, but you better have something to say outside of that. Job, that's a job God gave you. Wife, here you go. I picked her. When we go through this, it's too easy. I want to be liked. So I encourage you to like me. Now, what do you think happens if I make job bad? Sooner or later, I treat it like it's bad. What if I make wife bad? Sooner or later, I treat her like she's bad. So there is a direct way to encourage and tempt people to sin. There's an indirect temptation. You know, the Bible says, fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. We can indirectly provoke to jealousy, to anger, a lack of kindness, a lack of forgiveness, a lack of involvement. I heard this illustration a long time ago as a kid, and when I heard it, I just wanted to pick it apart, because that's not biblically right. Okay, there's a, let's see, how can I say this? All right, Brother Mike, there's a man whose wife passes away. He has a single daughter. Okay, she's 7 years old. He's going to work, he's providing for her, but she doesn't have mom anymore, and she has no brothers and sisters, so as soon as he comes home, guess what she wants? Dad's attention, play with me, talk to me, read to me. But every time, you know what he just says? No, go play outside. Well, she's not 7 or 8 anymore, now she becomes 9 or 10, but the request is the same. She's 12, she's 13, the request is the same. But when you start going playing outside at 13 and 14, it's now a different scenario. Go play in the streets. With Maddox, she did exactly that, and she became a woman of the streets. Now, the illustration goes, as she dies, she goes to St. Peter. Okay, well, we're not going to do that, because there's no evaluation of which one is bad. So we'll say she gets arrested, she goes in front of the judge. Here's the question. Who do you punish? Who do you hold accountable? She did all the deeds, but it was his apathy and his uncaring and his lack of concern. Does he have no accountability? There is an indirect temptation where we can provoke people with our lack of kindness and our lack of involvement. And then there's two more, which quickly. There's the idea of setting a bad example. The Bible directly talks about this in the picture of flaunting our liberty. Preachers talked about it in the last 2 weeks, I think twice. 1 Corinthians chapter 8 is going to tell us not to be a stumbling block by flaunting our liberty. And so there is a place where we can do exactly that. I'm free to do whatever, and in the doing of that whatever, Brother Kevin, it causes the younger, the immature, the less knowledgeable to sin. Well, this is going to take some time, but I'm not going to miss this. I've heard that my entire life. You know why I heard it, Brother Mannix? Because it's scriptural, it's biblical, and I should have heard it. We need to not be a stumbling block to those who are weaker. But let me tell you how it's usually applied. It's usually applied this way. I'll go stand in front of Timmy. You know, Timmy, how old is Timmy? 13, 14 years old. I'll go stand in front of Timmy. Teacher of Sunday school in the class. So I'll go stand in front of Timmy and I'll say, Timmy, you know what? I know you want to play the guitar. Well, let me tell you, my dad played guitar, and he only played it in beer halls and stuff. And so anytime I see a guitar, it makes me think of bars and stuff. And so this is why, you know, every time you play that, it causes me to be in this place of temptation. So, you know, 14-year-old, just starting to learn, I don't want you to cause me to stumble, so you need to stop playing the guitar. So that's crazy. No, I've heard, that's how we use it. We use, don't be a stumbling block to your brother on the younger brother to control and bring about our old hang-ups. Well, let's be careful about that, because you know what? It's better that a millstone be put around our neck and we're thrown into the sea than we do that. Let me tell you, that exact scenario I've heard with, let's see, my father is the best Christian I've ever known, and I'm on staff at a church. But when I see these instruments, it makes him think of this. And so y'all need to stop. how we apply the scriptures. He says, be careful, because you don't want to cause this one to stumble. And then here, I think we can fail to encourage a real relationship with the true God. Sometimes that happens this way. We just paint a weak Christianity. It's not a real relationship with the true God because we're not painting the true God. I know somebody, I have a relative, who does not do a single thing the Bible tells them to do. In fact, Doc, they just do nothing. Their life is about not doing anything and just being unhappy. But they will end every single conversation with this phrase. But prayer works. Ms. Maddox, every time I hear that, my first thought in the back of my head is, faith without works is... And usually we go into that conversation and it ends up with a click, a hang up. I've got to go. But there's also this thought. Prayer works, Ben, it works to do what? Because in this thought, prayer works to bring God around to what I want him to do, and if I keep praying enough, he'll do it my way. Sometimes we paint a weak picture of who God is, and that does not encourage a strong relationship with the true God. But sometimes we say nothing. And I'm going to say this. We need to work hard to create an environment where we're free to encourage one another. That doesn't come easy. Doc, I played a lot of sports. And so I've been on a lot of different teams. And I had a lot of coaches. Some teams, all the coaches are on the same page. They all think the same. They all get along. In that scenario, you can be on the offensive line, and the linebacker coach is going to see you doing something wrong, and you know what he'll do? He'll coach you. Or the receivers coach is going to see the running back, get himself tackled, and he's going to talk to him about running to daylight. All the coaches are free to coach you. That is a great environment, actually, for a player. You think, that's terrible. Everywhere you go, I can't do anything wrong. No, I feel like everybody is trying to help me. They all get along. It builds teamwork, and pretty soon we're all on the same page. And that is a tough team to beat, irrespective of talent. But the majority of the teams I've been on, it's, hey, I'm the defensive coordinator. You coach the offense. You leave the defense to me. And I think that spirit is natural to man, and hence is natural in the churches. We need to work hard to encourage the opportunity for us to help each other and speak out to each other. I'll give you this illustration. This happened recently. I think this was last week. Last week the preacher said something about, and if your parents, as a child, if your parents let you do everything you want, every parent in here was happy, and every child went, but if your parents let you do everything you want, you're going to grow up and you're going to be in a situation where, really, you're going to end up hating your parents. Now, he was hurrying for time, and so he made that statement and he went on. But Kevin, I saw a young person sitting close to me, trying to just pick at their parent. And I said, trust me, I won't hate you. Try it. Okay, well, Brother Mark, I've worked with enough young people. I know multiple young people who, and usually it's this way, if it's a girl, they get their dad to be the soft one and mom's the mean one. If it's a guy, they get mom to be the soft one and dad's the mean one. And they blackmail one or the other. So you have the parent that allows them to do everything, and then you have the parent who's the strict disciplinarian. And when they grow up, they're unhappy with their life, and guess what they do? They have a really good relationship with the disciplinarian, and they blame the soft one for every problem in their life. So Brother Fraser, I was like, I can't miss this. Not only do you have the great opportunity to describe the picture, to take it a little bit further, but more than that, you know what happens, especially as a young person, we come to church and we hear knowledge, but learning to apply it to our life is the next step. It's where we begin to grow in wisdom. So right, Kevin, it's just like, boom, natural. Hey, when church is over, give me 2 minutes. Now, I know that that person just was nervous from now to church. They probably didn't hear another thing the preacher said. Just nervous from that point. I got a chance to talk to him about 2 minutes. Brother Maddox, as soon as I was done, you know what I thought? Oh, I hope I didn't overstep. I hope I didn't offend a parent. I hope I didn't. Now, I will tell you, great encouragement. That parent popped their head around the door and said, oh, I just want to thank you so much. You know what that does? That fosters care one for another. That's what the church is supposed to be. Amen. When we don't, we are failing to encourage them to live godly. And we have a great warning. Now, it goes from this to verse 43. Greatness is about loving others. Greatness is a serious thing where we learn that, our testimony, good or bad, has great effect, and we need to take that effect seriously. And then 3, greatness now deals with self. It moves on from causing others to sin to causing ourselves to sin. And verse 43, and if thy hand offend thee, cut it off. This is pretty serious. It is better for thee to enter into life maimed than having 2 hands to go into hell, into the fire that never shall be quenched, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. And if thy foot offend thee, cut it off. It is better for thee to enter halt into life than having 2 feet to be cast into hell, into the fire that never shall be quenched, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. And if thy eye offend thee, pluck it out. It is better for thee to enter into the kingdom of God with 1 eye than having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire, where their worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. Greatness deals with sin because life is at stake. How serious is our sin? Well, sin is serious because hell is real. It's real. This has a change. This has an effect on us. Of course, these are all things we know. We know we're talking about the eye. This is how it enters in. So everything we see, everywhere we go, everything we try to do, all of these things, you know what? This is what makes up our life. And we need to deal with sin in every one of these areas because, let me tell you why. Because sin is always an inside job. We want to blame sin on the outside influences, but the Bible clearly teaches sin is an inside job. In fact, he teaches that in chapter 7. Chapter 7, verse 18. And he saith unto them, are ye so without understanding also? Okay, so, Miss Maddox, this is kind of a reprimand. I don't want to be in this reprimand, so let's see what he says in the reprimand. Do ye not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him? Because it entereth not into his heart, but in his belly, and goeth out into the draught, purging all meats. And he saith, that which cometh out of the man, that which defile the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceeds evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. Sin is always an inside job, James. Every man is tempted when he is drawn away and enticed his own lust. It's his own strong desire. It's already on the inside. Every Sunday school, sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a... habit. Reap a habit. Sow a habit, reach a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. It's been a long time since I've been in Sunday school. He begins to roll off this picture, and we got 6 minutes. It's a serious picture. How important is it? It is better that you cut your arm off. Why? Well, because you got a warning right up above here. That is the effect on others, and this is the effect on you. And sin is not to be played with because hell is real. Now, I don't want to give a topical study on hell, but there are 2 things I do want to look at. 2 quick. Usually when you talk about hell, you throw out things like Jesus spoke more on hell than anyone else. Jesus spoke more on hell than he spoke on heaven. Brother Fraser, we can talk about all these things. You know what? They're just stuff. Okay, but I want us to understand what hell does is it shows us how much God loves us. Now, the preacher talked about this a little bit on Wednesday as well when he was talking about the judgment from Revelation. But I want you to understand, it's crazy. It's crazy, Brother Jeremy. How can hell show us love? You know, the question usually is, how does a loving God even create a hell? Brother Mannix, I want you to understand, love often fills us with wrath. What do you mean? Picture this. A father could not be indifferent to a son's drug abuse if he loved that son. He couldn't. That drug abuse is limiting his life. That drug abuse is hurting all of those people who are around him. That drug abuse is destroying not just the now, but the future. Because you can't get this time back. How do you plan on living later? We're supposed to be like the ant and storing up today for tomorrow. It is stealing from them. It is demeaning their very life. Because you think anybody respects that drug addict? You know, if you just went through the counseling book, you know what you're going to find out? Any person in this situation, they almost always have a problem with anger too. You want to know why that is? It's because they're not respected for the person they are. And so in their anger, they demand that respect and intimidate and scare, which, by the way, causes more destruction, makes them more lonely, isolates them more. What parent could not care, could be apathetic to that picture? No, you're going to be very angry at that drug and what it is doing to that child of yours. Okay. I took it this way. Let's cut that out. Do it this way. Cancer surgeon. I right now know a bunch of people having cancer. I work with a guy I've worked with for 20 years who has gone through treatment again and again, gone into remission again and again, but it keeps coming back, and he keeps having to go to tests, and he keeps having to go to treatment, and it's just wearing him down and destroying everything that he had built up. And now he's at the place where he just went to see the doctor, and the doctor's like, there's nothing we can do. That's got to make you hate that cancer. God's wrath, God's creation of hell is not some fiery outburst. It's not some cranky emotional response. It is his settled opposition always to the cancer of sin, which is eating away at his creation, humanity. And he will not be apathetic. In fact, he came to restore it because hell is real. The gospel is the good news because hell is real. There is escape from hell. There is freedom from hell. There is restoration. Now, 2 minutes in here, I'm going to do this. A serious view of hell should change our tone. I've had the pleasure to go out to dinner with Miss Paula and Brother Mike. And Brother Mike's a fun guy. He likes fun. He's lived a good life. He knows lots of things. He can carry on the conversation by himself, which is good because I struggle at it. It is pleasant. If you get the opportunity, let me advise you to do it. Brother Mike, I think I've heard you preach 3 times, maybe 4 times. 2 of them are very memorable to me. So if it's 3, it's 2/3. You know, that's pretty good. If it's 4, even still, 50%. That's better than average. I would put you in a very high spot. But when we went out to dinner, let me tell you the thing that marked my life. Miss Paula, I know you're going to cry. Is listening to a story that you've probably told hundreds of times about not witnessing. And I don't mean to make you cry now. And a person dying and having the fear for the rest of your life that they will spend eternity in hell because it is real. Sometimes we talk about hell and our tone is almost, well, I just want them to know because, you know, the world wants to run out and send everybody, just go to, we should be saying go to heaven. It should change our tone. goes through here and he gives us this, what greatness is. Greatness deals with your own sin because hell is real. Greatness cares about our effect on others. And greatness is servant loving. Brother Mike, close in word of prayer.